Hi everyone, my name is Jiju and welcome to another episode of Naadan Combo. After so many years in the United States, many within our community have moved on to bigger and greater roles within the American society. So we at Naadan Combo decided it would be a good idea to actually talk to some of those individuals to get a better insight of who they are, how they got to that position, and how their culture made a significant influence in their current situation. Today, we speak to Dr. Ajay Nair, President of Arcadia University. Dr. Ajay Nair is the first president of color in this university's 171-year history. Arcadia University is located just outside of Philadelphia. So we talked to him about his college education, how he got to this particular point, what his views are, and how he is and the university is contributing towards the American society. We thoroughly enjoyed this 1-hour interview with him. We sincerely believe that you guys will too. As always, please like, subscribe, and share our content. If you have any questions or if you want to comment on anything, please email us at the link provided below. Thank you so much. Ajay, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're really busy, and I'm hoping that with this conversation we can get a little bit more insight about who you are, what's your motivation behind some of your goals in life,
Sure.
some of your past if possible.
Yeah.
And I have asked before, you're actually a Philadelphia.
Yeah. Born
Yeah.
and raised. Yeah.
Born and raised in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
so you're a
Yeah.
local kid, for
Absolutely.
using that word.
Yeah.
But so this environment. You've
I
been
do.
in this environment. You're also your parents are from Kerala,
Yeah. That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So you have this experience level. So I'm hoping we can just delve into some of those
Would
things
love it,
and
yeah.
then move forward to some more
Yeah.
different areas.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start with a very simple question
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
Okay. What's your definition of education, though? Because at your level as president of Arcadia, what does education really means to you? And more specifically, what does college education mean to you?
It's not such a simple question, actually. But
I'm trying to make it simple.
But I will try to simplify it. I mean, just from my own perspective, when I think about education broadly, it's really about producing students that are both work ready and life ready, right? And it's not as though producing students that are just ready for the workforce, in my mind, is enough. There are life skills that we as educators can provide our students as well. And so from a work perspective, it's kind of obvious. You want students to gain employment after their college education or after high school education, right? They should be trained to be able to pursue their chosen profession and enter the workforce. From a life readiness perspective, you could answer that a lot of different ways,
Sure.
but this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I think from my perspective, a student that's life ready can challenge the kind of structural barriers that exist in the world and serve as a change agent to make the world a better place, right? So if there's systemic issues that are holding communities or people back, my hope is that we as educators are helping students challenge those systems and reform those systems and make the world, I mean, it sounds cliche, but a better place for everybody.
Definitely. Do you see a difference in the type of students? The world has changed from when we were young and college was and everything. So nowadays there's I wouldn't call it's like the bubble effect where very much isolated maybe a little bit. Do you see that is that a critical thing that that needs to be addressed at a college level or at a high school level? Because what we learned on the streets or what we learned in our community, because we were always outside, for example, may not be the same today. Is that how you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a key component of it. I think the idea that I'll speak from a university perspective anyway, a residential university, which we are, that there's an opportunity here to help students develop interpersonal relationships and skills, right? And to cross boundaries, right? To immerse themselves in cultures that they may not be familiar with, and discover new ways of knowing and understanding. I think that is part of the life readiness as well. I mean, you can't be a change agent unless you understand the people and the world around you. So I think you're absolutely right. This generation of students, they have access to incredible amounts of knowledge at their fingertips, and in some ways are better off for it.
Oh.
But there could be some challenges related
to life
to
experience.
Yeah, exactly, life experiences, and just again that interpersonal dynamic, right? That probably could be strengthened in their relationships across the board. So I think we do that exceptionally well in a higher ed environment. And that's not to say that technology doesn't matter and we should ignore technology. I think you can do both successfully.
So you can deal with the helicopter parents and all that comes with the territory.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a new way of educating students, and it's not the kind of sage on the stage model that it used to be,
That
right?
traditional.
That traditional. It's an infusion of kind of the social environment with technology, and of course, when appropriate, the lecturer, right? I mean, there's different ways to educate students and different ways to reach students.
Sure.
It's our job to
you can't
satisfy
expect
that.
the student to adapt unless the institution itself is not willing to adapt to that change. You know what I mean?
Actually, it's our duty to adapt to the way in which students are learning and behaving, right? Without losing a sense of what our values are,
What a core
right?
objective.
The core objective and goals, right? Absolutely.
So you mentioned about, two pieces. One is the life experience. The other one was, of course, the employment, the career, right?
Sure.
So, nowadays, what we see right now, tends to be a little bit of difficulty in terms of what kind of career, so how do we tell a student that is coming into a college environment, like, okay, when we went to college, again, I'm referring, we already knew what we were going to be before we even stepped in there.
Yeah.
Then there came a trend where people came in and there was undecided component, now it's a complee confusion. Like, how do we prepare children? How do we prepare our next generation to come on board and say, like, do they have to know ahead of time, or is there some kind of method in which they can find out what is the best career for them?
I think it's a rare occasion when a 17 or 18-year-old can know with great certainty, what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. Maybe
the rest of their lives is the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty admirable, right? If they can. And the reality is that it really is a rare occasion because the world is different, right? Meaning we're preparing students now for jobs that don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, our students will have multiple careers, right? Not just one career. They'll have multiple careers just because the way in which the world is evolving. It's such a dynamic place, right? So for me, it's you could come to Arcadia and be a computer science major, but we've done a real disservice to you if we haven't provided you with a foundation in the liberal arts, right? If you don't know how to think critically, because it's quite possible that computer scientist could evolve into some other profession that is incredibly rewarding to them. So my advice then to young people and parents, actually, who are guiding them, is to find a path, whether that's college or some other path, that provides that student with the ability to think critically or to learn those skills. And I think if they can do that, then they'll be prepared for lots of different pathways, because at the end of the day, you can specialize along the way, right? But get that strong foundation so that you can be ready, again, for those jobs that don't exist.
So let me cite you one frequent example that, especially within the Indian community, that we see constantly. We have a lot of students who become nurses, right?
Sure.
So, our parents, nursing was a big deal. A lot of mothers went into nursing, So the next generation came on board.
Right.
But what we're seeing is that there's that much of a drop-off, too, because what they expected and what they're actually dealing with are two different things. Like, they went into the nursing field with the expectation of some money, things, and then they found out, the bedside care and the number of patients.
Hard work.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, Is that the type of what we're talking about in terms of preparation? And like, they know that, hey, this pays well, but guess what? You're gonna have to pay a price for it or something.
Yeah, I think, and this will maybe irk some people in some ways, but my general feeling and the advice I gave to my kids is you don't need to pursue pathways that, you shouldn't pursue pathways that are purely based on finances and monetary benefit. My best advice always is pursue something that you're passionate about, set goals, and you'll find success. Because if you are purely pursuing something for monetary benefit, the chances are you won't be fulfilled, you won't be satisfied, and you'll end up changing your profession anyway, right? Or you'll be miserable.
Nurses right now, they're moving to the statistical and the
Exactly,
CPT codes,
yeah,
and I see that trend right now going.
But therein lies another point, right? You can study nursing,
Correct.
right? And even if you study nursing and you practice nursing and don't like it, you still have a set of skills that are valuable and that can create pathways into other spaces and professions. So it's not as though it's the end of the world, but I think to enter college, if that's what we're talking about here, entering higher education with an open mind, right?
Correct, yeah.
And the idea that you're preparing for lots of different pathways, I think that's a healthy approach.
Prepare for the unexpected.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, that being said, what's your opinion on, because this is a huge discussion across America right now, trade school versus traditional college, right? There's a couple of factors. One, if you look at the society itself, there's a huge amount of shortage for carpenters, plumbers, electricians, mechanics, for example, and everything, And within our culture, that's still considered a secondary career path. What's your opinion? Like, I mean, as far as like, is everyone entitled to college education? Or do you think it is something that you should seriously consider if that is a viable alternative?
Yeah. Well, sadly, in America, not everyone's even entitled to education broadly, right? I mean, so there lies one problem. So I would never say that everyone's entitled to college. I wish everybody had that option and opportunity. It's just not the reality that we live in. I'd like to make that different if I could, right?
Sure.
But it's not. I would say that I wouldn't say that college is better than trade school or vice versa. I would never say that because it's an individual decision, right? Investing in college is a huge commitment, not just from a financial perspective, from a perspective of time too. Not everybody has that privilege or that luxury, right? You might encounter a student who's graduating from high school that has significant barriers in terms of time or finances, and may be able to pursue a trade and make a difference in their community, in the world, right? And we need them to do that, right? And so I would never take a kind of elitist attitude and say everybody needs to go to college. It's just not realistic or even appropriate for everybody. I hope it's an opportunity for a lot of people, right? And that's why I do the work I do, to make it as accessible for as many people as possible that want it. So it's not that one is better than the other. I will say that from an economic perspective, data consistently shows that students that graduate from college over their lifetime will earn more than someone without a college degree. Again, should that be your motivating factor? Probably not, but you led with that, right? That a lot of people maybe look down on other professions, probably because of the monetary element of it and the status element of it. But statistically, yes, you will make more money on average over your lifetime as a college graduate, even with the exorbitant costs of going to college, right?
Sure.
But that said, you said this too, we need people in all of these different professions, right? And I think it was Martin Luther King that said, if you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best darn street sweeper that you can be. I think at the end of the day, that should be people's mantra, right? Pursue something that you're passionate about and be the best at it.
So there's two key words that you use. I like the word investment.
Yeah.
That is the critical word.
It is an investment.
It is an investment, right? So college education or anything that you choose, you have to look at it from an investment.
Right.
And the second piece, what you're saying is that the status piece, there's not much we can do, but that's a social change that needs to happen at some point to,
That's
admit
right.
to the fact that, it's perfectly okay to be a mechanic.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a sad statement if there's some kind of, I don't know, socialization around those professions that's viewed in a pejorative way.
It's heavy in the Desi community.
It is in lots of communities, frankly, right? I mean, and I think that's unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way, but if it is it dominant in our community, hopefully these types of conversations can shift that opinion, because you need people in all walks of life and professions for the world to work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not as though you can't be a mechanic or an electrician and still contribute in profound ways to society. Of course you can.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, talking about investment.
Yeah.
The biggest conversation about higher education is its cost now, right?
Yeah.
10% increase over the past 5 years on the public sector.
That's
and
right.
about 18 to 20%
Yeah.
on the private sector.
Yeah.
Like, what's your opinion on that? And I'm not looking at it from the Arcadia standpoint, but in generally, isn't that a little prohibitive for some students to, move into a college?
It's a serious dilemma and problem in higher education, right? Costs are rising, and I guess what I'll say is, in some ways, it's a buyer's market now. I mean,
Exactly.
because there's a dwindling population of college-going students. Through 2029, we're going to experience a significant decline, particularly in the Northeast, of college-age students. And so what you'll find is that this is the inside scoop here, right? That institutions are discounting their tuition at incredibly high rates to win students, to compete effectively, particularly in areas like the Northeast where that population is dwindling. And so as enrollments decline, institutions are being more and more generous, Arcadia included, right?
Sure.
The institutions that are not being as generous, perhaps, are the institutions that aren't fighting for students, right? The quote-unquote elite institutions. But very few students are attending those institutions to begin with, right? So yes, the answer to your question is it's a problem, but institutions are committed, many institutions are committed to access and opportunity, and don't just look at sticker price for higher ed. Students rarely pay what's actually the sticker price. If you look at Arcadia, you might look at the price and say, there's no way I could ever afford that place. We make it affordable for any eligible student. I mean, we do our very best.
Sure.
And so most institutions do that.
So, like, to combat that, is like specialization is the key on that thing? Is that what because there's, last year there was an article, I think, with the CNN and the Huffington Post about a lot of institutions closing down.
Yeah.
Colleges closing down because they don't have enough students signing up.
Right.
And of course, these are these outlier institutions there. What's Arcadia doing to combat?
So I guess, for us, it's a twofold kind of issue. One is we're in a hyper-competitive market in Philadelphia. You're from Philly, we're saturated with higher ed institutions. So how do you stand out? How are you distinctive, right? Arcadia has a lot of distinctive qualities. And as you know, this is one of the most beautiful campuses in the country, right? We're doing this interview from a castle, right? So we have a lot of privileges at Arcadia, but we still have to fight for our students. And as you say, I mean, instead of specialize, I would say be distinctive. So the kind of flexibility that we want to be able to offer our students in terms of programs is really key. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here, offer programs that students are attracted to and that will provide them with employment opportunities, right? That we're providing practical, applied learning opportunities. And then at the graduate level too, we're finding success with what we call modularity, where students can take bits and pieces of different programs and combine them to create a program that is distinctive and meets their needs and the needs of the workforce. So we're doing a lot of different things to be competitive and distinctive in the higher ed space. But you're right, a lot of institutions are struggling because they're not doing those things.
Yeah, it's the specialization, it's the adaptation piece that we talked about
That's right.
earlier, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to adapt to.
That's exactly it.
And this is probably one key thing I'm going to take from this is that you mentioned about, students need to not, they're not going to be able to decide, but they also have to think through the process of what exactly do they want to do for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And I think picking out an institution that caters to that objective or goal is as important as the name on the,
Even more important,
More
actually,
important,
right?
okay.
I would say that's my opinion, right? Because again, most students aren't attending. The vast majority of college students are not attending institutions with these spectacular brand names.
Sure.
And so it's the vast majority of institutions that aren't highly selective that are creating mobility for the vast majority of students out there, right? The truth of the matter is it's less about the brand and actually the students' ability to thrive and learn on a college campus. They need to think about which campus is going to do that for me, right? And maybe brand matters. It does, obviously, right? But the more important components for me is the environment that you're in, the community that you're a part of. Is it going to be nurturing, and is it going to expand your horizons beyond what you ever thought possible? So that's what I would urge parents and students to really think about. It's why I made the move from the elite universities of the world to a really distinctive,
you could do
awesome
more
place.
in this particular environment than
Absolutely. And if we develop a model here, that model can be disseminated to thousands of institutions where it works and makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to address the elephant in the room because
Yeah.
this is a topic that is going across the board, especially with the Supreme
Yeah.
Court ruling, affirmative action,
Yeah.
changes there.
Mhm.
I don't want to give. It's not necessary I want your opinion on this thing, but I'm
Yeah.
more interested in, given the context of what's happening,
Sure.
how do parents and students kind of prepare themselves
Yeah.
in this particular environment? Like,
Yeah.
how do they handle it?
So this actually just feeds back to what we were just talking about, right? If you think about the affirmative action ruling, which prohibits institutions from using race as a factor in admission.
And not to cut you off, but I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest one of the key points that came out of it, because it's been some time now,
Yeah.
the most impact is in the programs that were provided to the students. It wasn't actually the enrollment aspect.
Well, that's what people are assuming will happen,
Oh, okay.
right? The downstream effect will be that there will be fewer programs and services as a result. There'll be fewer students of color going to elite graduate programs, then fewer students downstream in the workforce. The reality is exactly what you're saying, and that is that if you look at selective colleges, let's talk about colleges that accept fewer than 25%, right? Those are considered the most highly selective colleges and universities. Only 6% of college students attend those schools.
Wow.
Right? 6%. So affirmative action was being employed probably at most of those schools, but the vast majority of schools do not use affirmative action because we're trying to actually admit students.
Exactly.
We want them to come. We're not trying to reject students. That's not Arcadia's mission, to reject as many people as possible. That's actually a perverse, my opinion, a really perverse idea, right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
we don't want, no, actually we do want you and we want to help you be successful, right? So affirmative action hasn't been employed at the vast majority of institutions, isn't impacting most students. That said, there is a political message that's being sent, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it could have a chilling effect for lots of institutions. So students and families...
There's a scare factor.
There's a scare factor, absolutely. Students and families might believe that they shouldn't even bother applying now, even to Arcadia, right? Or even to community college, and that's just not right? That shouldn't be happening. So for me, I'm sorry, I'm offering my opinion, right? What really should happen for in U.S. higher education is that those investments need to be made at the vast majority of institutions to support students of color, where the students of color are actually attending, right? Not the highly selective institutions where they're not the ones actually educating most students of color. And so the advice I'd offer, and I'm not trying to persuade people.
Say, for example, if they want to get into that top 25.
Yeah, your daughter wants to go to Harvard, right? Like maybe she does.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't discourage her from doing
No,
that, of course.
definitely not.
And so what should she do? That's your question, right? So it's a pretty simple response. She doesn't need to hide her racial identity because she can still, through personal statements and essays, talk about how her racial identity, her race has informed her identity and her upbringing, if she wants to. And institutions can read that and evaluate it based on that. They just can't use race as a factor. So the Supreme Court didn't prohibit you
Correct.
from disclosing how race has impacted you, right? Because it's an important component of who you are. So I would continue to push students to think about that and talk about it openly.
To not be scared of accepting who you are. Those
Absolutely. And also to talk openly about, as openly as you can, about your leadership skills, all your extracurricular activities, why you're interested in that institution, all of those things that still really matter. There's a way to build your application that can be really attractive to an institution that's also authentic. And part of that authenticity is your identity, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And institutions aren't asking you not to disclose who you are, right?
Yeah. So last question on the education piece. We all love this question here. Like, what do you want your students to graduate with, apart from the certificate?
Yeah. Well, it's where I started the conversation with you today, right? I want students to graduate with this kind of life readiness and work readiness. And for me, the stories that are most compelling about our graduates are when they're out in the world and we're hearing about the kind of difference they're making. So let me sum it up this way. We want to produce the leading difference makers in their communities in the world. That's who we want to be. And if we could be a social impact university, I'd love us to be that, right? But so being social impact university doesn't mean that you can't go and get a great job too. And so that would be my wish for our students.
But it's a thought process that needs to be carried on, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, learning isn't a one-time thing, right? Or a four-year thing. It's a lifelong learning process, right? So what we're doing is providing students with the skills to continue to learn, right? Those critical thinking and writing skills that I think should be in high demand.
I want to go into your career a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and especially the fact that you're a native kid here. Was this position that you have, was that always on your radar? I mean, when you started your career, what was your objectives when coming out of college?
Yeah.
Let's start from there. Coming out of college, what was your objectives at that time?
Yeah, if it helps your viewers at all, I was a lost kid. But I had no idea what
definitely,
I
I want them to understand that. Adaptation is the key thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. People would imagine that. Oh, yeah, I was in diapers and thinking I want to be a college president. Nobody dreams of being a college president, right?
It's not.
I mean, I don't think so. Maybe they will after this interview, right? I doubt it. But I think I didn't think about being the president of anything. Honestly, that was never my thought process. And maybe I grew up in a bit of an unusual household in that my parents never said to me, you should be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. That's
like a top 3 on the Desi list.
Absolutely. That's why I mentioned that. I didn't hear that in my household, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if it was lack of investment in me or they're like, he's never going to make it. So, I don't know what it was exactly.
I don't want to burst
I'm just joking, by the way, but I think it was, there was an expectation that I would go to college, but even that wasn't a significant discussion in my household. I was always a good student.
Okay.
And so I think it was always this, he's going to go to college and he'll figure it out. But I was lost. I didn't, when I was ready to graduate college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I knew nothing about graduate school.
Not even academia, because you entered academia, right?
Yeah, so let me take you back to my senior year in college, right? I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't take my GREs. I was just excited that I was going to get a college degree. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need a job. I need to go to graduate school. I love school. I want to go to do more of it. But I was completely unprepared. Why? Because I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't have anyone to really talk to about it. And so I ended
and
up.
this, not to stop it,
Yeah.
but this goes back to a conversation that we had
Yeah.
about like our children
Yeah.
being able to kind of relate to some key things and people
Absolutely.
and individuals and things like that.
Yeah, so my point to them would be find people other than your parents, or in addition to your parents, I should say, that you can receive mentorship from, that you can receive guidance from, right? I didn't do that. I didn't do that successfully. It just so happened that one of my college professors took some interest in me my senior year and asked me what I was going to do. And it was a speech communications professor who said, I wrote this textbook for the World Language Institute in Gwangju, South Korea. You should go. Within weeks, I was in Gwangju, South Korea. I mean, no joke. I was fish out of water. I mean, it was a life-changing experience, right? I had to learn to speak Korean to survive, right? It was, and I look back and I'm like, what were you thinking? Like, how did you make it through that whole experience? But, I had at least enough courage to do that, and it changed my trajectory forever. It opened my eyes to what I thought I could actually do and accomplish. Sad news is I came back and I still wasn't prepared for anything, right? I mean, I had some work experience under my belt, but I came back and I used to do SAT kind of prep tutoring for at one of the local Penn State campuses during the summers. That's how I made money to survive in college, right? And I went back asking for a job, and they're like, "You have a degree, like you should go get a normal job, right?" And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "There's a job in admissions. You should go work in admissions." And somehow I got that job, and wow. That was the start of my higher ed career. I quickly realized that I couldn't do admissions work forever. I mean, that is a high energy job, and I mean, it's an awesome job, but it was a high energy job. And I wanted to go to graduate school, and so I finally got my act together and went and got a PhD.
But by that point, you saw some of the benefit. You saw a path, or
well, I had a full-time job. I could support myself, and I found time to talk to people and figure out the pathway. And that was after my PhD, and I actually got married while I was doing that. That was kind of the start of my career. And then from there, I've been really blessed. Was at the University of Virginia, the University of Pennsylvania, Columbia University, Emory University, and then here, all in positions that I'm really grateful that I had opportunities for.
Well, that's a wild story. Although we may have to put a sign up that says, "Parents, do not watch this particular."
But you know why?
Just put a warning sign in there. Parents, do not watch this.
You know why they should watch it? Because look, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, honestly, like it's a lot of hard work. I don't mean to make it sound like it's something.
Yeah, but that's the key thing that you want to, and like it is hard work. I'm
and
sure
risks,
you went through it.
And taking calculated risks. Right, and having the courage to do things outside the boundaries of what people said you should do. The key point for parents here is let your kids follow their passion and dreams, make mistakes, just teach them resiliency.
Correct. They got to learn from their mistakes, though.
They've got to learn from their mistakes and pick themselves up and go after whatever their goals are, right?
Yeah.
And the goals are what lead to success. If you're just going after success, without the goals, and that's what a lot of.
I love that line. That's
of what this generation does.
You have to have the goals to get to success, and that's absolutely correct. Because nowadays, what their children see is, and my children too, they see a segmented portion of a successful story.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
They don't see the pieces that go into that particular.
Right.
How many years did he couldn't eat?
Right.
Or
if I had said at age 21 that I wanted to be a college president and that was my goal, I would never have gotten here. Yeah. But all the goals that I had set for myself led me to this path.
And then the dominoes fall where it's supposed to fall, basically.
Yeah.
Talking about your the president's job, can you give me a brief explanation? How was your first day? You got the job, you're coming in. What was it like?
I had what many would consider a disastrous first day.
Oh, really?
I think it was an awesome first day, but if you looked at it on paper, you would say, oh gosh, he should have run for the hills, right? But so I'll give you a little bit of the lay of the land. Arcadia, before I came, had gone through several presidential transitions.
Sure.
It was a difficult time in the community, lots of turmoil, not uncommon in higher ed, but we had felt it all in a brief period of time. And the interim president at the time had initiated a series of budget cuts before I came on board. And it created some real chaos in our community. And so my first day, there was a protest.
Wow.
On our green. And it wasn't a protest against me, right? I mean,
but you're falling into it.
I mean, I'm now the president, right? And so I was sitting right here at my desk, and my assistant at the time, not April, someone else came in and said, I just want to let you know there's a little protest happening. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went outside and kind of peeked out the window. It was not a little protest. It was,
wow.
There were hundreds of people, right? And so I put my jacket on and I started walking, and my assistant was like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to the protest. I'm like naive, right? I'm like, so I'm going to go to the protest. I mean, not protesting me, right? I want to hear what's happening in the community. And most people would imagine that that's like the dumbest thing you could possibly do. But it turned out to be the smartest thing I've ever done, meaning that community members were shocked to see me there.
The fact you weren't afraid.
I've been accused of being naive in my career, right? I mean, I think of it as courageous. Maybe it's naivete, I don't know. But I think I walked into that truly with the sense that I wanted to listen and learn what the concerns were so I could do something about it. And I spent a lot of time in that, within that protest, and then was invited to a meeting with the faculty where I was asked a lot of tough questions about what I intended to do. And that was the beginning of some serious trust
building.
Trial
by fire? Can I use that term?
I think it was actually, it turned out to be totally the opposite of that. It was a beautiful relationship that was formed with the community of trust. High expectations, for sure, but trust. And that I was willing to put myself out there, and then my expectation was that people were willing to put themselves out there, right? All for the good of our students and the community. And I wish I could say that I was somehow being strategic when I did all that, but I was just being myself, right? And sort of bringing my authenticity to the table. Mm-hmm. And I think people recognize that I'm just a regular human being that isn't smarter than anybody else, but wants to listen and learn and make good choices and decisions, right? And so that was actually the beginning of what I believe to be a really strong relationship that you have to maintain, right? That you can't take it for granted. But that was my first day. And I don't know if too many people have had first days like that in higher ed.
You said you were naive. I like that word that you used, right? You're naive, you're optimistic, right? You're gung-ho,
Yeah.
So how is it now?
Yeah,
I mean, you've been here 5 years. Congratulations, by the way. It's your fifth year, right?
That's huge in higher ed these days.
That is huge.
5 years. No, I think I still approach it, the work in the same way.
Still the naive, or do you have a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. Let me use a better word, right?
Okay.
Like I pursue everything with a level of authenticity,
correct,
and bring my whole self to everything I do, right? So there isn't like the strategic move where. I'm like, let me present this persona today, or present this person today so that I can win people over. No, you either are going to appreciate who I am or you're not, right? I can't, there's not much else I can do about that. And so I approached the work in that way. People would accuse me of being naive in doing that. But for me, I came to this institution because I thought that opportunity was actually available. Okay. I've had to shed different parts of my identity in different spaces before to be successful. That is a painful thing to do. That is the one thing, again, that maybe parents will like raise eyebrows about when they watch this. You should never ask your kids to do that, because the cumulative effect of that is that... Like
shedding personalities, or...
Like when you enter spaces and you can't be who you actually are. Right? That,
there you go. You need to adjust.
Yeah, like that you're, some people would say selling out, right? Or whatever, however you want to frame it. And I have to say that it's a privilege to be in a job where I don't have to do that. Most people don't get to do that.
Correct.
So what I'm saying is really idealistic and kind of an optimistic view of like where people can land, but I think it is possible. I guess my best advice there is even if you can't do that, try to align your own values with an organization that you want to be part of, right? If there's a values disconnect between who you are or who you want to be and that organization, it's going to be pretty miserable for you, right? And you can never probably achieve your full potential.
So I think it's safe to say like be optimistic, but also realistic.
Yeah. You probably early in your career won't get that opportunity to just like where it's like a perfect match.
No, it's not.
Right? You're going to have to sacrifice a little bit and maybe be a little unhappy and all of those, but you should always have that in the back of your mind, right? Like, what does this organization represent? What does this company represent?
Okay.
And is that a place where I can truly thrive? And how far am I willing to go in terms of the compromises I might have to make? And who is that impacting? Is it impacting only myself or other people around me, right? So all of that, I think, is part of the equation. And my first day ended up being a success because I could be myself.
Are there like one or two key things that any leader should be carrying as far as like if you want to be in this position, man or woman, what do you think are like one or two or three max, like, key things?
One is definitely the idea of sort of generosity, being willing to give your time, energy, encouragement to other people. That I think is a key quality of any good leader, right? Being present and being generous with your time and energy. And I like to use this word. It's Maxine Green, educational philosopher, called it wide awakeness. Some might say it's being woke. I don't really ascribe to that. I think about this wide awakeness, this idea that sort of learning, the deepest kind of learning comes from being alive, awake, furious, with an intensity and passion and love for learning, right? Like that, like intellectual curiosity, right, is something every leader
regardless of the position. It could be finance, it could be something else.
You don't have to be a president of a university to be intellectually curious. Exactly, right? That no matter what you're doing, always be a learner and don't assume that you know everything about everything, right? That you're constantly on this learning journey. I just think that's absolutely key. And maybe the most important, the third, since you asked for three, the third element is just humility.
Yeah.
Right? Like just, or just even acknowledgement that it's like a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, right? Like, I think about it as much as like, this person is outperforming me or that, but more that I'm constantly on a journey to critique myself and my shortcomings and my flaws so that I can be better, right? Like a better person and a human being. And if I can do that, then I'll be able to connect with people in deeper, more meaningful ways
It's really
too,
good.
right? Without that kind of humility, you've already drawn a boundary around
You can't
it.
learn too. Even the
Can't learn.
intellectual curiosity may not.
They're all
work.
related.
They're all related.
All
It's like
three all three are deeply related and interconnected. And those are values that I ascribe to and live by. I mean, I try to. I'm imperfect for sure, but those are things that I really care about.
You're Desi. Like, so we're going around asking people, like, from a percentage wise, how much of you do you consider American versus how much of you consider,
Yeah, that's a really tough question because I feel like I'm.
Like considering all these, you're born and raised here all this time, but you still have a cultural component.
Yeah,
here, right?
well, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I consider myself Desi, right? But I guess my pause was that I think the reality is all of us inhabit lots of different spaces, sometimes simultaneously, right? Like, so in other words, I can move in and out of being Desi to Asian American to college president to artist to scholar. I mean, I have like 30 identities at least, right? And it's sort of, again, the cumulative effect of all of that makes me who I am. And so absolutely I'm Desi. And I'm not saying that when I jump to another space, I'm no longer Desi.
No.
I'm carrying that with me, but maybe
That's the key
another
thing, though.
identity is more prominent in that space and in that moment, right? But being Desi informs who I am. I mean, literally it means of the earth, right? Like a homeland, homegrown kind of thing. And so, of course, it's it's an intrinsic part of who I am. And so that's not something that, look, even if someone wanted to like get rid of that, you can't. I mean, it's a visible part of who we are, right? And I have no desire to be rid of that kind of an identity. I think it's a powerful part of who I am. But my point is, being Desi, I think, also means that you can be many different identities.
Okay.
Right? You don't have to like and
So what would you advise? Because this is the last question here.
Yeah.
What would you advise a child that's growing up, especially our children?
Yeah.
We're like their third generation now, right?
Yep.
They're more American than and the odds of them going back to the motherland are almost non-existent. You know what I mean? They probably would at some point in their lives they'll probably say, "Oh, that's where my parents came from." So how do you tell them it's okay to carry that badge, or it's okay to learn from that, or it's okay to keep that culture going? I mean,
I think the key is to make sure they understand, and that we understand, that there isn't one way to be Desi.
Okay.
There isn't one way to be Malayalee. There isn't one way to be Indian. There isn't that being Desi.
They can define it themselves
however they want, and they should never let anybody say you're not Desi enough.
That's
what
beautiful.
in the world does that mean? Right? Like that you're not. Like, who gets to make that decision? Right? Because you can be Desi.
Is there only? There's no such thing as only. No. There's only one way of being Desi, or one way of being Malayalee. Right?
You create your own authenticity around that, and you should have the freedom and luxury to do that because it's a powerful thing to be given that kind of freedom. That's not what we grew up with. Yeah. Right? What we grew up with is, no, if you don't speak your language, or you don't go to church, or go to a puja and pray, suddenly you're not this, right? You're not enough of a Desi. And imagine what that does to someone psychologically, right? Like, that's incredibly damaging. You should have the freedom to be who you want to be, and embrace that identity however you see it, right? And that's a growth opportunity too.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is a great learning experience.
Appreciate that.
This is one of the key things that we want our next generation to understand, that it's okay to be, from a particular culture, but also be accepting of other cultures and be something that you want to be.
Exactly.
You can also be 100%. You can also be American through and through as American pie.
Yep.
But keep a little piece of that.
Sure.
In there.
Yeah.
And use it as a badge of honor type of deal.
Absolutely. There's so much to be gained from doing that. I'm who I am and sitting in a presidency today, I think in part because of my Desi identity. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.